Salutations and welcome, friends, to another episode of Amalfi Sports. I'm your host for this episode, Matthew DeSantis, and in this particular episode, we are taking a break from handicapping horse races or breaking down the latest sporting events to bring you an interview. This is going to be a new feature of Amalfi Sports where we interview people in horse racing and across the world of sports about their experiences and knowledge. Remember that the best way you can get all of this content on Amalfi Sports is to subscribe to our podcast feed or our YouTube channel, which you can find a link to in the episode notes. And of course, you can also get all of this great content on the Amalfi Media website, which is simply the name of the company, amalfimedia.com. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Jessica Paquette, who is both the Director of Communications and Annual Funds at the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation and also the head handicapper and racing analyst for Colonial Downs in Virginia and Sam Houston Race Park in Texas. Prior to working in those positions, Jessica spent 15 years working in a variety of positions at Suffolk Downs in Massachusetts, where she became an on-air handicapper and broadcast analyst, and finally the Senior Vice President of Marketing. Jessica is a graduate of Riviera College and still resides in Massachusetts, where she cares for 2 off-track thoroughbreds. Sit back and enjoy my conversation with Jessica about her entry into the sport of kings, how she evaluates turf horses, and what are some of her favorite tracks. Jessica, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today about your experience and knowledge in the horse racing industry. I wanted to start by talking a little bit about your background. You did not come from a horse family, which is sometimes a little unusual in this industry, and but you got involved with the program Kids to the Cup. And I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about what drew you to participating in that and what exactly Kids to the Cup is for those who might not be familiar.
So Kids to the Cup was founded in, I believe it was 2000 or right about there, by Trudy McCaffrey with the help of John DeSantis to introduce the younger generation to horse racing in a really positive way. I was at the time probably 14 or 15, and like most weird horse girls, didn't have a lot of friends in real life. And that's where the internet came in, the old AOL horse racing message boards. And there was a whole bunch of weird horse kids, and we would talk about our favorite horses and start fan clubs and do the kind of things that obviously made us very popular among our peers in real life. And someone, it was John DeSantis who reached out to us and said, hey, we're putting a trip together, this first trip to the Breeders' Cup for a bunch of, this is Kids to the Cup. Do you want to do it? And I went to my mother and said, hey, a stranger told me it was going to take me on a trip to the Breeders' Cup. Can I go? And that was that. They invited our parents as well. So it didn't seem quite as sketchy as, it could have. But this was in the safer days of the internet because I'm old. So no one knew how, dangerous the internet was back then.
Yeah.
And that was it. So Trudy and John kind of took us to races all across the country. We met a bunch of, people our own age that loved horses and loved racing and got to see the very best of the sport.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, where did this interest in horses and horse racing kind of come from if your family wasn't really into it? I mean, I know you grew up in Massachusetts. Were you always drawn to kind of Suffolk Downs and kind of the local tracks, or was this just something that was kind of spontaneous and rare in the family, so to speak?
Well, most little girls, I think, have the I want a pony phase, and I never quite grew out of it. And we didn't come from a lot of means. So, riding horses was not really something I was able to do that much when I was younger. And I just became drawn to horse racing, catching it on TV here and there. And I just fell absolutely in love with it. And there was a local connection who had a horse in the 1990s, who had a horse on the Derby Trail in 1997. He didn't wind up making it to the Derby. But following that coverage in my local sports paper, the Lowell Sun, it was this way to feel connected to the sport in a broader way. And that was it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's amazing. And so once you kind of discovered this passion, was this something where you started to get your parents involved, taking you to local tracks? I mean, I grew up in Pennsylvania. I remember my dad taking me to Penn National, just kind of teaching me how to read a racing form, et cetera. And, I would kind of beg him to take me, on the weekends, and he would place $2 bets for me because I couldn't do it myself and little things like that. But I just didn't know if you started getting more involved after that or what other opportunities you found to get involved in horse racing.
Well, I did, but, eventually you get your license, and
Yeah.
I realized very quick. I mean, pretty much the first place I went when I had my license was to Rockingham Park,
That's awesome.
and so I mean, because that's what a normal 16-year-old girl does, is they go to their friendly neighborhood racetrack. So I would go to Rockingham, which was a little closer to my house than Suffolk Downs was. So I'd go to Rockingham, usually by myself as a teenage girl, again, very safe. And there was a group of older gentlemen there who I think they saw me the first couple of times and they were like, oh, goodness, this girl is going to get murdered or abducted. So they invited me to sit with them and started teaching me how to handicap and read the form. And that's where I learned from a group of salty old racetrackers.
That's the best place to learn. That's wonderful. That's a great story. Uh, I'd imagine you just said how you kind of got introduced to handicapping early on, but you were a self-described pedigree nerd. And I was wondering where that interest was unlocked in you, or was that just a natural progression of learning handicapping and something you were kind of immediately drawn to in terms of researching and understanding races and horses?
Well, I think of myself as a horse person first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the sport. And the gambling and the handicapping is a very interesting part of this. But for me, it's always the horses first and foremost. So my best friend growing up was also a little bit of a horse racing nerd as well. And we would get the Blood Horse Stallion Register, that big
Oh
honkin'
yeah.
book.
Yeah.
And we would spend hours on the phone going page by page, discussing what we liked and didn't like about every single stallion. And I think that's where we
Wow.
formed, or at least for me, it was where I formed a lot of early opinions that have kind of stuck with me. And when you stare at enough horses, you kind of learn what you like and what you don't like. And it
Sure.
is all very subjective in a lot of ways. I
Hmm.
mean, certain things do set a horse up for certain successes, but what you like, that's what makes a good bloodstock agent as well. I mean, having a certain eye for it and then putting it all together.
Yeah, no, that's I when you were talking about the blood horse encyclopedia, I was thinking of the baseball encyclopedia when I was a kid. That was like 1,000 and 1,500 pages long, and the paper was just so thin
So
on each
thin.
page, and you're just kind of thumbing through it. Our younger listeners will have no idea what we're talking about.
These were printed items that they would mail to you.
Exactly. Yeah. No,
The
it was a
digital
wild
versions are
time.
not the same.
No, they're not so easily searchable and everything. So that's great. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your current position. So you spent a lot of your professional career at Suffolk Downs, where you went from kind of your whole career trajectory from kind of intern to senior VP of marketing to an on-camera personality and handicapper. And you're serving in the latter role now at Colonial Downs, which is in New Kent, Virginia. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about what makes Colonial Downs so distinct as a track and what kind of drew you to this opportunity.
I was just so grateful to get the invitation to get to talk about horses in public again. When Suffolk ended, I certainly worried that I may not have a place in the industry because it's becoming a smaller and smaller industry.
Yeah.
And it can be more and more difficult to find your way, especially if you maybe, aren't related or whatever.
Hmm.
So I was thrilled to get the opportunity, and I had done some work for Sam Houston over the winter, and to kind of get back in the game has been a thrill. But Colonial it feels like a real racetrack. It's full of really good horse people, and the thing I love most about it, having just been there for 2 weeks, is that the focus is so much on the horse. That the horse's safety and well-being is at the priority of everything that everyone does there, and I think that's a real precedent for the industry to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually kind of wanted to ask you about Sam Houston, where you did, if I'm not mistaken, did you do virtual handicapping, and kind of what was that experience like? I mean, because at least for me, so much of my opinion sometimes is formed in the paddock and just being able to see how a horse looks and is responding to certain things and the weather and that sort of stuff. And so I just didn't know what that experience was like doing it virtually.
So I did two things at Sam Houston. I did
Okay.
virtual handicapping, and then I also did in-person announcing. I
Okay.
was the track announcer for a weekend of quarter horse racing, which was big fun,
Yeah.
very fast, lots of fun. But it was a little bit of an adjustment doing the virtual handicapping, kind of filming the videos in advance,
Okay.
because I feel like my strength as a handicapper is the insights that I can offer in the paddock.
Hmm.
But We picked some winners, had a lot of fun doing it. I'm hoping to get to do some things in person in Sam Houston, maybe this winter.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things I was, I don't live too far from Colonial Downs. I went there for opening day. It was a wonderful time. One of the things that I was really pleased to see was all the turf racing that's there. And I was wondering if you could just talk to our listeners a little bit about what makes some horses more fit for the turf and more fit for turf racing, and why some horses may prefer a particular turf on some courses to others. I feel like that's a science that a lot of Americans, because so much of American horse racing or the prestige events are on dirt, and I just feel like turf sometimes gets glossed over. But I was wondering if you could shed some light on that.
So one of the most interesting things I found talking to some of the riders who are very familiar with this turf course is I had this preconception from my time at Suffolk Downs, which was a very particular sort of turf course. Horses did not always love it. It was a very uneven. It kind of went like that. It was tricky for some horses.
Okay.
And I always had gotten into the habit there of looking for a horse with a lighter, cattier body type, sort of a finer build.
Mm-hmm.
And talking to some of the riders at Colonial this past week has been eye-opening in that it's actually the opposite on this turf course. They prefer to ride something with a little more bone and a little more substance, that these bigger horses actually get over this course a little bit better.
Oh, interesting. And I just saw you just today when you were tweeting out some of the photos from the paddock. You were talking about one of the gentlemen said if races were determined by size, an elephant would always beat an antelope.
I will remember that forever.
I know. I saw that. I was like, well, I'm adding that to my stable of quotes that I'm going to be using.
That's a good racetrack quote. I really liked it. And the filly ran great. I mean, she just got beat. I bet she wins next time. Mike Tomlinson's on fire this week.
Yeah, no, and she very pretty little filly too. I really
very pretty, but like emphasis on little.
Yes.
She was a petite little filly.
Yeah, honestly looked like the type of horse that you would have on like a, kind of an outing in the suburbs, with a little just a horse ring for children to walk, go around in. So, but hey, game filly, so that's great.
Very game.
So you mentioned that you are first and foremost a horse person, and I wanted to talk a little bit about one of your other jobs, which is as Director of Communications and Annual Fund at the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation. You also have a pair of off-track thoroughbreds at home. So clearly, like I said, this is something that's important to you. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about what the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation does and how people could even get involved in that organization or others like it.
So the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation is one of the oldest aftercare organizations in the country, and they provide sanctuary for horses that get injured or are not able to have second careers when they're done racing. Some of them, either physically, mentally, they're not suitable to go and do a job. Of my two Thoroughbreds that I've gotten off the track, one was very much suitable to go have we had a wonderful decade-long adventure off the track. He was a wonderful show horse and has been my greatest partner of my life. But my other one is not. He is not capable. He is not physically able to have a second career. He is physically capable of being a really pretty lawn ornament. But there are not always people, suckers like me, lining up to take a horse that can't go and do off the track, and that's where the TRF comes in. They also partner with some penitentiaries throughout the country to provide the inmates the opportunity to learn life skills while working with the retired racehorses in a Second Chances program, where they learn skills that they can take when they're released from prison, and the horses get wonderful care.
Well, that's really great to hear. That's and somebody who I've been drawn to horse racing since I was a kid, and I was, like you, I was drawn because I loved horses. The gambling, the betting, the handicapping, sure, that's fun, but I just love watching horses. So that's great to hear, because you do worry about horses after their careers are over, and even after they become less functional in other areas. So that's wonderful to hear. So I wanted to finish up with a couple of some quick hitting racehorse questions. No right or wrong answer necessarily. And some of these might be tough for you, but just give me kind of the first answer that pops to your mind. So, okay. What is your favorite racetrack?
Extinct or not extinct, because Suffolk Downs will always be number one.
Okay. So after Suffolk Downs, then we'll go with current.
I'm going to say Colonial Downs because I am a good company woman, but also a Colonial Canterbury Park.
Oh,
Canterbury
okay.
Park is really high on my list. It's one of the most charming, sweetest little racetracks you could ever go to.
Yeah, no, I watch it frequently on America's Day at the Races, and yeah, it does look very cute up there. So what racetrack that you have never been to do you want to visit most?
Arlington, and I better do that soon.
Oh yeah, it's closing in a
Yeah.
couple of weeks. So yeah, you better get out there and all your travels, all your free time that you have.
Right. I'm just hoping I can kind of get a detour flight.
um, all right. So do you prefer turf racing or dirt racing?
Turf.
Okay. And this is, like I said, no right answer here. In your opinion, who is the best 3-year-old horse in America?
I mean, I don't think this is maybe the most exceptional group we've ever seen.
Sure.
But Elusive Quality has done everything right.
Okay, that's a great, yeah. You're right. It's not the most spectacular, but it just seems like a deep crop, though, of a lot of really good horses.
I would be more excited about Elusive Quality if I thought he'd run past 3. And I'm not entirely convinced he will. So that's where I'm a little, not super pumped about him, but also Hot Rod Charlie. What a game. I mean, what a hero. What a game little horse he is.
Yes, very much. I just recently rewatched that Belmont because I was looking at Essential Quality for the upcoming Jim Dandy. And I mean, my gosh, what a race Hot Rod Charlie ran that day. I mean, just incredible. So big picture beyond the 3-year-olds, do you have who do you think is the best active racehorse at the moment?
I mean, I'm gonna go with Latruska again because I'm a good company woman and she's the Sam Houston Ladies Classic winner. But she's just phenomenal and just keeps surprising me. She's the kind of horse that makes me excited to be a racing fan.
Yep. Same here. I agree. I watched her a couple of weeks ago at Churchill. Just amazing. So finally, do you have, after looking through all of those encyclopedic books, do you have an all-time favorite racehorse?
It's a 1 and a 1A for me.
Okay.
I'll never be able to separate them. I mean, I should say What a Trippy. He's my off-the-track thoroughbred, but he'll probably buck me off tomorrow for not saying him. That's fine. Blazing Sword was the horse I followed in 1997 and 96 that kind of got me hooked on racing. And then Graham Hall was the horse that made me fall in love with the sport. When I was with Kids to the Cup as a weird horse crazy kid, Todd Pletcher was incredibly gracious, letting a bunch of weird horse girls run amok through his barn. And Graham Hall was a 2-year-old back then, and he was this little common, kind of unpleasant. He bit, just my type. And I just adored him. And I was there when he won the Jim Dandy and got to go in the winner's circle, which was the greatest thrill for my 16-year-old life.
Oh, wow.
And then when he won the Stuyvesant, kind of right after 9/11 when the Breeders' Cup was at Belmont, it was on the undercard that day. I was in the winner's circle then, too. And his career was a great thrill to me.
That's awesome. That's a really great story. So you can find Jessica on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays at Colonial Downs, where post time is 1:45. And as I mentioned earlier, I was out there for opening day. I had a great time. Lots of wonderful people, lots of wonderful amenities. But also, Jessica, I wanted to give you a second to let the listeners know, kind of give a little pitch about why they should make the trip down to New Kent to visit Colonial Downs during this racing season.
Big fields, great turf racing, a lot of great horsemen and women. It's absolutely worth the trip.
I couldn't agree more. So, Jessica, thank you again for your time and sharing your knowledge and experience with the audience. All the best this season at Colonial, and I hope to have you back in the future so we can talk about some more horse racing.
Thank you.
A big thanks to Jessica for her time and knowledge. And make sure to tune back to Amalfi Sports for more horse racing handicapping, interviews with figures from across the world of sports, and so much more. Finally, if you want to keep up with me and the daily news of horse racing, follow me at Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace or visit us at amalfimedia.com. Until next time, I'm Matthew DeSantis reminding you it's now post time.